My name is George Taylor. I was 68 years old when my own children declared me mentally unstable to seize control of my entire fortune. I wasn't born into wealth. I built it over decades. Real estate, logistics, manufacturing. I was deliberate, cautious, and always 10 steps ahead of my competitors. I had 2 children, Eric and Melissa. I paid for their education, their first homes, and even their failed startup ventures. I believed in giving them every possible advantage. At 67, I began experiencing mild forgetfulness, misplacing keys, repeating a question I had already asked, forgetting why I entered a room. Typical signs of aging. I consulted my primary care doctor, and after a thorough examination, he told me there was nothing alarming. Still sharp, still coherent. He advised me to reduce stress. That same year, Eric began showing up more often. He claimed he just wanted to check on me, but he'd constantly question whether I remembered certain details, financial ones mostly. At first I thought it was concern. Then I noticed him sifting through my drawers, lingering around my office, asking for access to account logins, just in case something happens to you. Melissa, on the other hand, suggested I appoint a financial guardian. She called it a precaution. When I refused, she became colder, more distant. I didn't know it at the time, but they had already begun consulting lawyers. One afternoon, Eric brought over a friend of his, Dr. Hensley, a psychiatrist. I was told it was just a social visit, but Dr. Hensley began asking me questions, casual at first. Then they became invasive. Do you hear things that others don't? Do you feel that people are plotting against you? Have you forgotten what year it is? I answered honestly. No, no, and no. 2 weeks later, I was summoned to a voluntary evaluation to ease everyone's concerns. I agreed. The evaluation lasted less than 20 minutes. The conclusion: paranoid schizophrenia, early onset in late adulthood. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I demanded a second opinion. I was denied. Under the pretense of emergency medical guardianship, Eric and Melissa filed a court petition using Dr. Hensley's diagnosis. They claimed I was a danger to myself and potentially to others. They presented fabricated testimony from a former maid, claiming I once forgot I had fired her and attempted to enter her home. I was forcibly removed from my house and placed in an upscale psychiatric facility. I was no longer allowed to access my companies. Power of attorney had been transferred to my children. The will had been quietly amended. My signature had been forged. The facility I was taken to was called Pinecrest Behavioral Health Center. It looked more like a retreat spa. Clean rooms, white corridors, piped-in classical music. But behind that facade, it was a place to disappear people like me. Wealthy, inconvenient, and legally silenced. At Pinecrest, I wasn't mistreated physically, but the psychological strategy was clear. Disorient, isolate, invalidate. I was placed on mild antipsychotic medication immediately, without true justification. The goal was to create symptoms rather than treat them. Every day, I was evaluated by a rotating panel of specialists. They asked repetitive, leading questions. The more I insisted I was sane, the more they marked me as combative. I realized quickly, this wasn't treatment, this was containment. I requested to speak with an independent evaluator. Denied. I asked to call my attorney. Denied. Meanwhile, Eric and Melissa had begun liquidating my assets. Several properties were being sold to shell companies connected to Eric's associates. My private investments were being consolidated. I even heard rumors from a nurse that my art collection had been reappraised and moved into storage under Melissa's name. Weeks passed. I remained compliant, outwardly, but I memorized staff routines, keycard access schedules, camera blind spots. I began collecting information the old-fashioned way, through observation and pattern recognition. One evening, I overheard two staff members in the break room. One mentioned that Dr. Hensley received a consulting fee every time he processed an expedited psychiatric guardianship. That wasn't standard. That night, I stopped taking the medication. I hid it under my tongue and flushed it later. Within days, my mind cleared. A week later, during a supervised outdoor walk, I was approached by a new staff member, Dr. Lena Martinez. She was soft-spoken, mid-30s, and observant. Unlike the others, she didn't treat me like a liability. She asked questions that weren't leading. She listened. I tested her. I mentioned a specific detail. You know, my children forged a power of attorney document. My signature is looped, not flat. Look at it sometime. Instead of brushing it off, she replied, "If that's true, there would be a digital timestamp in the notary database." She didn't confirm her intentions, but I saw it in her face. She suspected something was wrong. Over the next few days, Dr. Martinez spent more time with me, quietly, discreetly. She asked for full access to my records. She reviewed every evaluation. She cross-checked dates, names, and billing codes. I saw her eyebrows tighten during her analysis. She wasn't just seeing patient data. She was seeing fraud. Then, one morning, she walked into my room early and said, "Do exactly as I say. I'm getting you out of here, but we have to make it look procedural." She filed an appeal for reassessment under Section 14B of the Mental Health Code, which required a 72-hour external review by a state-certified psychiatric panel. Because she framed it as a compliance audit rather than a protest, the administration approved it. That was the first breach in the wall. The external panel arrived 3 days later. 3 professionals, one state-appointed psychiatrist, one hospital oversight officer, and a legal health advocate. Dr. Martinez arranged the schedule so that she would sit in on my reassessment. I was calm, precise, focused. I answered every question with full awareness and clarity. I made it a point to reference specific market events, real estate trends, and the political environment, all current. When asked about family, I simply stated, "My children had me placed here. I believe their motivations were financial, but I'll let the facts speak for themselves." The panel didn't react visibly. They just took notes. 2 days later, I was transferred to a lower observation wing for positive progress. Dr. Martinez met me in the library on the 3rd night and handed me a small folder. Inside were printed copies of internal billing codes submitted by Dr. Hensley. Each one corresponded to a diagnosis he had billed the hospital for, patients who had unusually high net worth, and who, curiously, had signed over power of attorney shortly after their diagnoses. 6 others, just like me. She also handed me a USB stick. "I can't use this," she said, "but you can." Inside the USB, PDF scans of appointment reports, medical notes with copied signatures, and most critically, an audio recording. It was of a conversation between Dr. Hensley and Eric. They were discussing how much longer it would take for full asset control and the need to get the house transferred before the reevaluation window. That was the evidence I needed. I requested a transfer of my legal representation to an external firm, initially denied. But after Dr. Martinez submitted a report to the State Health Board citing irregularities in my case, The hospital reversed its stance. I contacted David Linwood, my former legal advisor, one of the few people I trusted. He had worked with me for over 20 years. When I called him from Pinecrest's monitored phone line, I used a prearranged phrase. "You still keep the vault locked?" He replied, "Always." David showed up at Pinecrest 2 days later, under the pretense of legal consultation regarding patient assets. Dr. Martinez arranged a private meeting room. For 15 minutes, we spoke in coded language and notes passed across a chessboard. When he left, he had the USB drive. 3 days later, I was informed that my status at Pinecrest had been updated. I was no longer classified as an involuntary patient. The reassessment panel had found no compelling clinical evidence supporting a schizophrenia diagnosis, but I wasn't released yet. Eric and Melissa filed an emergency injunction to delay my discharge. They claimed I was manipulating hospital staff. It bought them 10 more days of control. But they didn't know David. David filed an emergency counter-motion with the county court, along with a petition to freeze all estate-related activity. Attached to the petition, a sworn statement from Dr. Martinez, audio transcripts of the Hensley-Eric meeting, metadata confirming alterations to the power of attorney document, and a notarized copy of my previous will, retrieved from David's archive. Within 48 hours, the court placed an injunction on all transactions involving my estate. Eric and Melissa were locked out of the accounts. That same week, Pinecrest came under a surprise audit by the State Health Board. Dr. Hensley was suspended pending investigation. On the 9th day, my release was approved. I walked out of Pinecrest wearing the same clothes I had entered with. But this time, I wasn't confused or tired. I was calculating. I didn't go home. I stayed at an anonymous extended-stay hotel booked by David. We met that night with a third person, attorney Claire Whitman, David's litigation partner and former fraud prosecutor. Claire was the type of person who didn't blink when told the full story. She just asked, "Do you want justice or destruction?" "Both," I said. We got to work. Claire began by launching a civil suit against Eric, Melissa, Dr. Hensley, and Pinecrest Behavioral Health. The charges included medical fraud, intentional misdiagnosis, power of attorney abuse, asset, misappropriation, elder exploitation, conspiracy to defraud. We knew the legal battle would take months, but the objective wasn't just to win, it was to trap them. David and Claire instructed me to remain completely silent publicly. No interviews, no press, no calls to family. The element of surprise was critical. Meanwhile, Dr. Martinez quietly connected us with the families of 2 other patients who had experienced similar psychiatric abuse at Pinecrest. One woman's father had been held there for over a year, during which his condo had been sold off. Another man had died in Pinecrest, and his family had never been allowed a full autopsy. These witnesses joined the case. Claire also filed to reverse the amendment to my will. It had been signed during my hospitalization under duress, legally invalid. The signature analysis alone proved forgery. Combined with the audio evidence and hospital documentation, the court ordered a full freeze on all distributions. We struck Pinecrest directly. Using whistleblower protection laws, Dr. Martinez provided evidence of internal staff bonuses tied to psychiatric admissions, altered diagnosis templates, emails from Dr. Hensley instructing staff to use code phrasing to flag wealthy patients, surveillance footage showing patient files being accessed outside of treatment protocols. The state board issued a temporary shutdown pending full investigation. The media picked it up. Headlines spread fast. Private mental facility accused of targeting elderly for financial control. Eric and Melissa went silent. Their lawyers began settlement talks, but I wasn't interested in settling. Not yet. Instead of settling, Claire and David prepared a coordinated legal maneuver. Simultaneous civil and criminal referrals. The local district attorney received a full evidence packet. Within it, emails between Eric and Dr. Hensley discussing guardianship quotas. Bank records showing transfers from Melissa's account to a consulting LLC registered under Hensley's wife, a voice memo found on Eric's phone, recovered via subpoena, in which he says, "Dad's too old to fight this. We just need 2 months, then it's over." The DA's office opened a formal investigation into conspiracy, fraud, and elder abuse. Meanwhile, Claire pursued a deposition. Eric and Melissa were forced under oath to answer uncomfortable questions. Melissa broke first. She admitted to signing false affidavits and to paying $75,000 to Dr. Hensley through a shell company. She claimed Eric orchestrated the scheme. Dr. Hensley was arrested during the investigation. His license was suspended permanently. When presented with the evidence, he offered a deal: full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentencing. He testified that Eric and Melissa approached him with a proposal: diagnose George with late-onset schizophrenia, recommend Pinecrest as the only secure facility, and submit a report to justify involuntary guardianship. In return, he would receive $100,000 over 2 transfers, a board seat on one of Eric's venture firms, future referrals from other wealthy families. The fraud was systematic, repeatable, and well hidden until now. With testimony in hand and court orders secured, Claire filed for full restitution of all stolen assets, including interest and damages. It wasn't just about getting everything back. It was about exposing every single layer of their betrayal. The judge granted a full reversal of power of attorney and restored all legal rights to me, effective immediately. Eric and Melissa's access to my accounts, properties, and holdings was permanently revoked. Every transaction executed under their temporary authority was declared null and void. Shell companies were dismantled, and fraudulent property transfers were rolled back. The court also ordered them to repay all withdrawn funds, including proceeds from sold assets, with interest. When they couldn't pay it back, liens were placed on their homes, their cars, and their remaining personal holdings. Their bank accounts were frozen pending further restitution reviews. But it didn't end there. Claire initiated a secondary lawsuit: defamation and reputational damage. She argued that my forced confinement, orchestrated diagnosis, and removal from public visibility damaged my credibility as a business owner and investor. We provided documentation of canceled board appointments, lost contracts, media speculation regarding my declining health. The jury sided with us. Damages awarded $4.7 million, personally owed by Eric and Melissa. They were officially bankrupt. Eric attempted to start over in a consulting firm. No one would hire him. Melissa moved to another state, changed her last name, and still couldn't escape the scandal. Their faces had been all over the local news. Their reputations were unsalvageable. Pinecrest was shut down permanently. A class action lawsuit involving 11 former patients followed. State legislation was introduced shortly after, mandating stricter oversight of psychiatric guardianships. I didn't make public statements. I didn't do interviews. I didn't explain what happened. Because everything that needed to be said was already on paper. And now, everything that was taken, my name, my dignity, my fortune, was back where it belonged, in my hands. 6 months after everything was resolved, I restructured my entire estate. I sold off half of my holdings and converted the rest into a private foundation, one designed to support legal advocacy for elderly patients targeted by fraudulent psychiatric schemes. I named it the Martinez Linwood Foundation, after the doctor and lawyer who helped save me. I didn't just want justice. I wanted prevention. Systems were broken. People like me weren't rare. We were just silent. That silence ended with me. I never saw Dr. Hensley again. He accepted a 5-year prison sentence as part of his plea deal and surrendered his medical license permanently. Eric and Melissa each declared personal bankruptcy. My legal team ensured that every attempt they made to hide or shield assets was caught, frozen, and processed through the court. They never contacted me. Not once. No apology, no explanation, no remorse. I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was how calm I felt through it all. I didn't seek revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't yell, threaten, or retaliate emotionally. I used logic, law, evidence, discipline, and that was more powerful than rage ever could be. People often ask me if I miss having a relationship with my children. The truth? I miss who I thought they were. But the people who set out to destroy my life for money? They were strangers long before the diagnosis. Now, I live in a quiet house outside the city. I still manage parts of my estate, but mostly I mentor others who've gone through something similar. I don't trust easily anymore, but I've learned to invest in people the same way I invest in markets, by verifying over believing. And every morning I wake up knowing that the smartest thing I ever did was stay sane long enough to prove they weren't.